The morning rain had finally stopped when the black cars began arriving at Westminster Abbey. William stood near the entrance, his naval uniform pressed to perfection, watching as mourners filed past in somber procession. The funeral of Lord Edmund Harrington, a distant cousin and longtime family friend, had brought together members of the royal family and aristocracy from across Britain. William's eyes swept across the gathering crowd, noting familiar faces hidden behind black veils and dark sunglasses. His grandmother would have called it a proper send-off, with all the traditional elements in place. The organ music drifted through the ancient stone walls, mixing with the quiet murmur of conversation and the occasional sniffle from those who had known Edmund best. As he adjusted his collar, William caught sight of Camilla emerging from her car. She wore a simple black dress and coat, her blonde hair tucked beneath a modest hat with a small veil. Nothing about her appearance seemed unusual at first glance. She moved with the same measured grace she always displayed at public events, accepting condolences from other guests with quiet nods and brief words. But then, it happened. As Camilla turned to speak with the bishop, a small smile crossed her lips. Not the polite, practiced expression she wore for cameras or formal greetings, but something different. Something genuine that seemed to come from deep within. The smile lasted only a moment before disappearing behind her usual composed mask, but William had seen it clearly. He found himself studying his stepmother more carefully as she made her way into the abbey. There was something in her movements, a lightness that seemed out of place at such a somber occasion. Her shoulders, usually held with rigid propriety, seemed more relaxed. Her steps, while still dignified, had an almost imperceptible bounce to them. William tried to shake off the observation. Perhaps he was reading too much into a simple moment. Funerals could bring out unexpected emotions in people. Maybe Camilla had remembered a fond memory of Edmund, or perhaps someone had whispered a comforting word that lifted her spirits momentarily. The service began with all the expected formality. The Archbishop's voice echoed through the vaulted ceiling as he spoke of Edmund's long life of service and dedication. William sat in his designated pew, 3 rows behind Camilla, giving him a clear view of her throughout the ceremony. She sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, the picture of appropriate mourning. Yet William couldn't stop watching her. There was something different about her today, something he couldn't quite identify. When the congregation rose to sing the first hymn, he noticed how she held her hymnal slightly higher than usual, as if wanting to see every word clearly. During the eulogy, delivered by Edmund's eldest son, Camilla dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, but William caught a glimpse of her face in profile. Her eyes weren't red or puffy. The handkerchief seemed more prop than necessity. As the service continued, William's attention kept returning to his stepmother. He observed how she interacted with those around her, offering gentle touches on arms and whispered words that seemed to bring comfort. But there was an energy about her that didn't match the heavy atmosphere of grief that permeated the abbey. When they stood for the final prayer, William positioned himself to get a better view. Camilla's head was bowed appropriately, but he could see her fingers moving against her prayer book. Not in the nervous fidgeting of discomfort, but in what looked almost like anticipation. The movement was subtle, barely noticeable to anyone not paying close attention, but William had spent years learning to read the subtle body language of those around him. The service concluded with the traditional processional. As the pallbearers carried Edmund's coffin down the aisle, Camilla stood with everyone else, her face a mask of solemnity. But, as the coffin passed her pew, William saw it again. That same small smile, flickering across her features for just an instant. This time, he was certain he hadn't imagined it. The congregation began to file out slowly, following the coffin to the churchyard where Edmund would be laid to rest. William hung back, allowing others to go ahead while he continued to observe Camilla. She moved with the crowd, accepting more condolences, patting hands, and murmuring appropriate responses. But that underlying current of something else remained. Outside, the afternoon sun had broken through the clouds, casting long shadows across the ancient headstones. The burial ceremony was smaller, limited to family and close friends. William stood across from Camilla at the graveside, finally, able to see her face clearly without obstruction. As the Archbishop spoke the final words and Edmund's coffin was lowered into the ground, William watched Camilla carefully. Her expression remained composed, but her eyes were bright with something that looked nothing like grief. When she stepped forward to throw her handful of earth onto the coffin, as tradition demanded, her movements were fluid and sure. The ceremony concluded, and the mourners began to disperse slowly. Some headed to their cars, while others lingered to speak in hushed tones. William noticed Camilla separate herself from the main group, walking slowly among the older headstones as if taking a contemplative stroll. He decided to follow at a discreet distance. She moved with purpose, though she appeared to be wandering aimlessly to any casual observer. Her path took her to a quiet corner of the churchyard, where ancient yew trees created a natural shelter from view. William stayed behind a large monument, watching as Camilla stopped beside a weathered headstone. She stood there for a long moment, and then, to his amazement, she smiled again. This time it was no fleeting expression but a full, warm smile that transformed her entire face. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out what appeared to be a single white rose, placing it gently on the grave. As she straightened up, Camilla looked around carefully, as if checking to ensure she was alone. William pressed himself closer to the monument, holding his breath. She seemed satisfied that she was unobserved and reached into her pocket again. This time she withdrew what looked like a letter or card. William strained to see more clearly as Camilla knelt beside the headstone, apparently reading whatever was written on the stone itself. Her lips moved as if speaking to someone, though her words were too quiet to carry across the distance. She placed the letter against the headstone, securing it with a small stone, then stood and brushed off her knees. For a moment, she simply stood there, that mysterious smile playing on her lips again. Then, as if remembering where she was and what she was supposed to be doing, her expression shifted back to appropriate solemnity. She adjusted her hat, smoothed her coat, and began walking back toward the main group of mourners. William remained hidden until she had passed, his mind racing with questions. What had he just witnessed? Whose grave had she visited? What was in that letter? And, most puzzling of all, why did she seem so happy? He waited several minutes before emerging from his hiding spot, not wanting to risk Camilla seeing him and realizing she had been observed. His mind was spinning with possibilities, none of which seemed to make complete sense. Camilla had always been difficult to read, maintaining a careful public persona that rarely cracked. But, today, at a funeral of all places, he had seen something entirely different. As William made his way back to where the cars were waiting, he caught sight of Camilla speaking with his father. Charles looked tired and drawn, as he always did at funerals these days. But, Camilla looked energized, despite her appropriately mournful expression. She touched Charles's arm gently, appearing to offer comfort, but William wondered if she was actually the one drawing strength from the day's events. The ride back to Clarence's house was quiet. William sat in his car, staring out at the London streets while his mind replayed everything he had observed. He knew he should probably dismiss it all as coincidence or misinterpretation. People processed grief in different ways, after all. Perhaps Camilla's strange behavior was simply her way of coping with loss. But, deep down, William knew he had witnessed something significant. The question was, what exactly had he seen, and, more importantly, what did it mean? The following days passed with William unable to shake what he had witnessed at the funeral. He found himself distracted during meetings, his thoughts constantly returning to Camilla's mysterious smile and that solitary grave visit. During a routine briefing about upcoming royal engagements, he barely heard the aide listing his schedule, his mind wandering back to that weathered headstone and the white rose. Catherine noticed his distraction first. Over breakfast 3 days after the funeral, she set down her teacup with deliberate care and fixed him with that knowing look she had perfected over their years together. "You've been somewhere else entirely since Edmund's funeral," she said gently. "What's troubling you?" William pushed his eggs around his plate, considering how much to share. He and Catherine had few secrets between them, but this felt different somehow. It wasn't his secret to tell, yet keeping it to himself was proving impossible. "Did you notice anything unusual about Camilla at the funeral?" he finally asked. Catherine's brow furrowed slightly. "Unusual?" She seemed appropriate enough. Perhaps a bit more composed than some, but that's rather her way, isn't it? That's just it, William said, leaning forward. She was too composed. More than that, she seemed almost pleased about something. His wife studied him carefully. Funerals affect people differently, William. You know that. Some people smile when they're nervous or uncomfortable. But William shook his head. This was different. I saw her visit another grave after the burial. She left a rose and a letter. And, Catherine, she was genuinely smiling. Not nervously, not uncomfortably. She looked happy. Catherine was quiet for a moment, processing this information. Whose grave? I don't know. I was too far away to read the headstone clearly. William pushed back from the table, restless energy coursing through him. I can't stop thinking about it. What if something's wrong? What if she's involved in something we don't know about? Or, Catherine said carefully, what if it's something perfectly innocent that's simply private? William wanted to accept that explanation, but something nagged at him. Over the years, he had developed strong instincts about people, and, right now, every instinct told him there was more to this story. He decided to do something he rarely did, pay an unexpected visit to Clarence's house. If he could observe Camilla in her regular environment, perhaps he could determine if the funeral behavior was an anomaly or part of a larger pattern. The staff at Clarence's house seemed surprised but pleased to see him when he arrived that afternoon. He made excuses about needing to discuss an upcoming charity event with his father, knowing Charles would be at Parliament for most of the day. Her Royal Highness is in the blue drawing room, the butler informed him. Shall I announce you? No need, William said casually. I'll find my way. He walked through the familiar hallways, his footsteps muffled by thick carpets. As he approached the blue drawing room, he heard something that made him pause, laughter. Not polite, restrained laughter, but genuine, delighted peals of joy. William peered around the doorframe. Camilla sat at her writing desk, telephone in hand, her face animated with happiness. She hadn't noticed his arrival, too engrossed in her conversation. Yes, I understand completely, she was saying, her voice warm with emotion. Tuesday would be perfect. I've waited so long for this. No one suspects a thing. She paused, listening to whoever was on the other end. The funeral provided the perfect cover, actually. Even Charles didn't question my needing some time alone afterward. William felt his pulse quicken. Perfect cover? No one suspects? What was she talking about? Camilla continued, I still can't quite believe it's real after all these years. When I saw the confirmation, I actually cried. Can you imagine? Me, crying over a piece of paper. She laughed again. Though I suppose it's more than just paper, isn't it? It's proof. It's vindication. It's everything. She swiveled slightly in her chair, and William quickly stepped back, pressing himself against the wall. His mind raced with possibilities, each more concerning than the last. What confirmation? What proof? I'll need to be careful about the announcement, Camilla was saying now. The timing has to be perfect. Too soon and it looks calculated. Too late and we lose momentum. A pause. Yes, I know. Patience. I've been patient for 40 years, I can manage a few more weeks. 40 years? William's mind reeled. What could she have been waiting 40 years for? The conversation seemed to be winding down. William heard Camilla say her goodbyes, promising to call again soon. He quickly retreated down the hallway, ducking into an alcove as he heard her footsteps approaching. She passed by without noticing him, humming softly to herself, actually humming. As she headed toward the private quarters. William waited several minutes before emerging, his thoughts in turmoil. He needed more information, but how to get it without revealing his suspicions? An idea struck him, and he made his way to Camilla's study, hoping she hadn't locked it. Fortune favored him. The door opened easily, and he slipped inside. The room was meticulously organized, every surface clear except for her desk, which held neat stacks of correspondence. William felt a twinge of guilt as he approached it. Snooping went against every principle of privacy and trust he held dear, but something larger seemed to be at stake. The top layer of papers appeared to be routine, charity correspondence, invitations, thank you notes. But, as he carefully lifted pages, looking for anything unusual, a letterhead caught his eye. It was from a law firm, but not one of the usual royal solicitors. The letter itself was gone, only the empty envelope remaining, but the postmark was from 3 days ago, the day before Edmund's funeral. William photographed the envelope with his phone, making note of the law firm's name, Hartwell, Davies, and Associates. He'd never heard of them, which in itself was unusual. The royal family's legal matters were typically handled by a small, trusted circle of firms. A sound in the hallway made him freeze. Footsteps were approaching. William quickly straightened the papers and moved away from the desk, pulling out his phone as if he'd been checking messages. The door opened, and a maid entered, startling slightly at seeing him. "Your Royal Highness. I didn't know anyone was in here." "Just waiting for my stepmother," William said smoothly. "Thought I'd catch up on some emails while I waited. But I've just realized I have another appointment. Please tell Her Royal Highness I'll call later." He left Clarence's house with more questions than answers, but at least now he had a lead. Back in his car, he called his most trusted aide, Simon Pemberton. "Simon, I need you to quietly look into a law firm for me. Hartwell, Davies, and Associates. But, please, absolute discretion." "Of course, sir. May I ask what specifically you're looking for?" William hesitated. "I'm not entirely sure. Just anything that might connect them to the royal family. Or to Camilla specifically." That evening, as he sat with Catherine and their children, William tried to push his concerns aside. George was excitedly telling them about his day at school, while Charlotte practiced her piano pieces, and Louis built elaborate towers with his blocks. This was what mattered, he reminded himself. Family. Stability. Trust. But, even as he helped Louis add another block to his precarious construction, William couldn't stop thinking about Camilla's words. 40 years of patience. Proof. Vindication. What secret had his stepmother been harboring for 4 decades? Catherine caught his eye over the children's heads, her expression concerned. He gave her what he hoped was a reassuring smile, but knew she wasn't fooled. Later, after the children were in bed, he would tell her everything. Perhaps her perspective would help make sense of this puzzle. As he tucked George into bed that night, his eldest son looked up at him with those serious eyes that sometimes seemed far too wise for his years. "Papa, why do people keep secrets?" George asked suddenly. William paused, thrown by the question. "What makes you ask that?" "James at school says his mom has a secret drawer where she keeps chocolate. He found it but pretends he doesn't know." William smiled despite his heavy thoughts. "Well, sometimes people keep secrets because they want to surprise someone. Like birthday presents. But what about bad secrets?" The innocent question hit closer to home than George could know. Sometimes people keep secrets because they're afraid or because they think it will protect someone they love. But important secrets usually come out eventually. George seemed satisfied with this answer, snuggling down into his pillow. As William turned off the light and closed the door, he wondered if his own words were prophetic. Would Camilla's secret, whatever it was, come out eventually? And, when it did, what would it mean for their family? His phone buzzed with a text from Simon, initial research complete. "This firm specializes in something very specific. We need to talk in person. Tomorrow morning?" William stared at the message, his unease growing. Whatever Camilla was hiding, he was getting closer to the truth. The question was, did he really want to know what that truth might be? The next morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching William's apprehensive mood as he met Simon at a discreet private club in Mayfair. His aide was already waiting in a corner booth, 2 cups of coffee steaming on the table between them. Simon's usually cheerful face looked unusually serious. "Thank you for meeting me here rather than the office," Simon began, sliding a folder across the table. What I've found is sensitive. William opened the folder, scanning the documents inside. His eyes widened as he read. Hartwell, Davies, and Associates specialized in one very specific area of law, inheritance disputes and estate settlements, particularly those involving contested wills and long-lost heirs. They'd been working on one case for nearly 4 decades, Simon continued quietly. It involves a substantial estate in Gloucestershire. The Ashworth family fortune. The name rang a faint bell in William's memory. Ashworth, wasn't that the family that died out in the 80s? That's what everyone believed. Sir Reginald Ashworth died in 1983 without any recognized heirs. His estate has been in legal limbo ever since, managed by trustees while various distant relatives fought over claims. Simon paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. But, recently, new evidence has emerged suggesting Sir Reginald may have had a child no one knew about. William felt the pieces beginning to fall into place, though the picture they formed seemed impossible. And this connects to Camilla how? Simon pulled out another document. I had to dig deep for this, but there are rumors, unconfirmed until now, that Camilla's mother had a brief relationship with Sir Reginald before she married Bruce Shand. The timeline matches, William finished, his voice hollow. He stared at the papers, trying to process what this meant. If Camilla was Sir Reginald's daughter, not Bruce Shand's, then she had been living with this secret her entire life. There's more, Simon said gently. The grave you mentioned, the one she visited after the funeral? I checked the cemetery records. There's an unmarked grave in that section belonging to a woman named Margaret Whitfield. She was Sir Reginald's personal secretary for 30 years. Let me guess, William said. She died recently? 6 months ago. But, here's the interesting part, in her will, she left a sealed letter to be delivered to Camilla upon her death. That letter, according to my sources, contained documents proving Sir Reginald was Camilla's biological father, along with Margaret's sworn testimony about the affair. William leaned back in his chair, overwhelmed. The white rose, the letter at the grave, Camilla's joy, it all made sense now. She hadn't been happy about Edmund's death, she had been celebrating finally, having proof of her true parentage. The Ashworth estate is worth approximately £300 million, Simon added quietly. If Camilla can prove she's Sir Reginald's daughter, she would be the sole heir. But, William shook his head. She married my father. She's part of the royal family. Why would money matter to her now? Simon's expression grew even more serious. I don't think it's about the money, sir. I think it's about identity. Imagine living your whole life knowing you weren't who everyone thought you were. The man who raised you wasn't your real father. Your actual father never acknowledged you. That has to leave scars. William thought about Camilla's words on the phone, vindication, she had said. After 40 years of keeping this secret, she finally had proof of who she really was. No wonder she had been unable to contain her joy, even at a funeral. What do I do with this information? William asked, more to himself than to Simon. That's your decision, sir. Legally, she's done nothing wrong. The inheritance is rightfully hers if she can prove parentage. But the press will have a field day, William finished. The king's wife, secretly an heiress, hidden parentage, 40 years of deception. It would be a disaster. They sat in silence for several moments, both understanding the implications. William's phone buzzed. Catherine, asking if he would be home for lunch. He typed a quick reply, his mind still reeling. There's one more thing, Simon said hesitantly. The law firm has scheduled a press conference for next week. They haven't announced the subject, but... William's heart sank. Camilla was planning to go public. That explained her comment about timing the announcement perfectly. But, did she understand what this would do to the family? To Charles? He thanked Simon and left the club, driving aimlessly through London while he tried to decide what to do. By the time he reached home, he had made his decision. He had to talk to Camilla directly. That afternoon, he called Clarence's house and arranged to have tea with his stepmother. When he arrived, she greeted him warmly, but he could see the slight wariness in her eyes. Did she suspect he knew something? They made small talk for several minutes before William decided to be direct. I saw you at the cemetery after Edmund's funeral. You visited another grave. Camilla's teacup rattled slightly as she set it down. Did you follow me? I was concerned. You seemed different that day. She studied him for a long moment, and William saw various emotions cross her face: surprise, fear, and, finally, resignation. I suppose it was too much to hope no one would notice. You always were observant, William. Is it true? About Sir Reginald Ashworth? Camilla's eyes widened. How did you? She shook her head. Of course. You've had someone investigate. I should have expected that. Why didn't you ever tell anyone? Camilla stood and walked to the window, her back to him. What would have been the point? My mother made her choice. She married Bruce and gave me a father who loved me as his own. By the time I was old enough to understand the truth, Sir Reginald wanted nothing to do with us. My mother begged me never to speak of it, to protect the family's reputation. But you knew. I knew. She turned back to face him, and William saw tears in her eyes. Do you have any idea what it's like to see your real father in the society pages, to know he's out there living his life while pretending you don't exist? To carry that secret through your first marriage, your children's births, your second marriage? William felt a wave of unexpected sympathy. And Margaret Whitfield? She was the only other person who knew the truth. She was there when the affair happened, helped keep it quiet. After Sir Reginald died, she would write to me occasionally, telling me she was sorry for the pain the secret had caused. When she died, she left me the one thing I never thought I'd have: proof. The press conference next week. Camilla sighed. You know about that too. Yes, I was planning to announce it. To finally claim my birthright, not for the money, but for the acknowledgement. To stop being the woman who lived a lie. But what about father? The family? The scandal this will cause? She returned to her seat, suddenly, looking older than her years. I've thought of nothing else. Part of me wants to stand up and tell the world the truth. To stop hiding. But another part. She looked at William directly. I do love your father, you know. This isn't about him or our marriage. It's about me, about finally being whole. William was quiet for a moment, processing her words. Then, he asked, what was it like at Edmund's funeral? When you realized you were finally free to tell the truth? A small smile crossed Camilla's face, the same smile he'd seen at the cemetery. It was the most inappropriate thing, wasn't it? There I was, supposed to be mourning Edmund, and all I could think about was that I finally had the power to reclaim my identity. When I visited Margaret's grave, I thanked her. For the first time in 40 years, I felt like myself. And now? Now I don't know. Seeing your face, knowing what this could do to the family. Is my personal vindication worth the chaos it would cause? They sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, William spoke. What if there was another way? What if you could acknowledge your heritage privately, take the inheritance, but do it quietly? No press conferences, no public announcements? Camilla looked at him with surprise. You would support that? Family is complicated, William said slowly. I've learned that over the years. We all have our secrets, our private pain. What matters is how we move forward. Your father doesn't know, Camilla said quietly. I've wanted to tell him so many times, but I was afraid it would change how he sees me. I think father has proven he loves you for who you are, not who your parents were, William replied. But that's a conversation for you to have with him, when you're ready. Camilla reached across and took his hand, squeezing gently. Thank you, William. For understanding. For not judging. We're family, he said simply. That's what family does. As he prepared to leave, Camilla called him back. The smile at the funeral, I'm sorry if it seemed disrespectful. It's just that after carrying this weight for so long, I felt liberated. I understand, William said, and, surprisingly, he did. We all deserve to know who we truly are. He left Clarence's house with a new perspective on his stepmother. The secret she had carried wasn't one of malice or deception, but of identity and belonging. The money, the inheritance, those were just symbols of recognition she had been denied her entire life. That evening, as he told Catherine everything, she listened without judgment. When he finished, she said simply, "Poor Camilla. What a burden to carry alone." "She won't be alone anymore," William said. "Whatever she decides, we'll support her." 2 weeks later, the news broke quietly. A small item in the financial pages announced that the Ashworth estate had finally been settled, with the inheritance going to a previously unknown heir. No names were mentioned, no details provided. The press conference had been cancelled, replaced by a private legal settlement. At the next family gathering, William caught Camilla's eye across the room. She gave him that same small smile, but, this time, he understood it completely. It wasn't the smile of someone keeping a secret. It was the smile of someone finally at peace with who they were. Charles, standing beside her, whispered something in her ear that made her laugh. William noticed how his father's hand rested protectively on her back, and wondered if perhaps that conversation had already taken place. Either way, Camilla looked happier than he had ever seen her. Sometimes, William reflected, the most profound revelations came in the most unexpected moments. A smile at a funeral had led him to understand that everyone carries hidden burdens, secret histories that shape who they become. The key was not in the secrets themselves, but in how we choose to handle them when they finally come to light. As he watched Camilla interact with his children, telling Louis a story that had him giggling uncontrollably, William realized that family wasn't just about blood or birthright. It was about acceptance, understanding, and the choice to support each other through whatever revelations life might bring. The smile at the funeral hadn't been inappropriate after all. It had been the beginning of Camilla's journey to wholeness, and, in witnessing it, William had learned something valuable about the complexity of human nature and the power of compassion. In the end, that unexpected smile had brought their family closer together, proving that sometimes the most surprising moments could lead to the most profound understanding.